On April 26, 1986, life in the Soviet city of Pripyat was normal. Children played in the parks, families went about their daily routines, and workers prepared for another shift at the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Within hours, everything would change forever. Pripyat would become one of the most haunting ghost cities in the world, and in the years since, abandoned videotapes and film reels have surfaced offering chilling glimpses of life before, during, and after the disaster. This is the story of the abandoned videos of Pripyat. Welcome back to the channel. Join me as we uncover the mysteries and secrets of our past. Do you feel like you're stuck in a rut, like your life is just a boring loop that never ends? Are you ready to break free from the ordinary and discover what truly lies beyond the horizon? In 1970, Pripyat was just another Soviet town, albeit a very modern one. It had everything the Soviet government thought its workers needed: schools, hospitals, cinemas, plenty of sports facilities, and even an amusement park that was scheduled to open just days after the tragedy. In fact, the park was so modern that many of its rides didn't even start operating until the mid-1990s, meaning that they never operated at all. By 1986, it had nearly 50,000 residents. People were proud to live there. It was considered one of the best cities in the Soviet Union for workers. But how did it end up being a ghost town? Well, if you know anything about the former Soviet Union, you probably know about the Chernobyl incident. On that fateful day in April, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl plant exploded, releasing massive amounts of radioactive material into the air. Residents of Pripyat weren't told immediately. For nearly 36 hours, they continued their lives, unknowingly being exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. Footage from this time shows children still playing outside, couples walking in the park, and weddings taking place, all of them under an invisible cloud of deadly contamination. As the sun set over Pripyat on April, the city was far from empty, but within days, it would be without a single soul. On April 27, 1986, buses arrived in the city. Residents were told they had to leave temporarily, just for a few days. They packed light, leaving behind furniture, photographs, toys, and personal belongings. No one ever returned to live there. Footage from this moment shows endless rows of buses, residents wearing puzzled expressions, and soldiers directing people calmly, hiding the true scale of the disaster. But they knew. They knew that they might never return to the city again. So they took what little they could carry and boarded the buses. We can hear the chatter of locals as they get on the bus, unsure of when or if they'll be back. There's also a solemn march led by a military band as others leave their homes. But what happened next was disturbing. As the bus pulled out of the city, we can see a large plume of smoke rising in the distance. Was this the reason they were being evacuated? They couldn't say. At least not yet. The full truth of the situation wouldn't be revealed for weeks. After all, the Soviet government tried to cover up the disaster initially, trying to prevent panic among the population. But what really happened? Well, in the early hours of April, a runaway nuclear reaction occurred in reactor number 4, causing a partial meltdown of the reactor core. This released a significant amount of energy, resulting in the explosion of the reactor's containment structure. The explosion and subsequent fire released large quantities of radioactive material into the atmosphere. This spread over large parts of the surrounding area, including the nearby city of Pripyat. So why did the Soviets try to cover it up? Well, there were several reasons. Firstly, they were concerned about the potential impact on their political standing. The Chernobyl disaster was the largest nuclear accident in the history of the Soviet Union, and the government was afraid that news of the disaster would spread and cause unrest among the population. They feared that this could lead to calls for greater transparency and accountability, which could threaten the stability of the Soviet system. Secondly, they were concerned about the economic cost of the disaster. The cleanup and medical treatment of those affected by the disaster would be extremely expensive, and the government was afraid that this cost would be too much for the Soviet economy to bear. Finally, they were concerned about the environmental impact of the disaster. The radioactive contamination spread by the explosion had caused significant damage to the environment, and the government was afraid that this damage would be irreversible. They hoped that by downplaying the severity of the disaster, they could avoid international scrutiny and prevent the spread of this information. However, this proved to be impossible as the disaster quickly became known around the world. What happens next was heartbreaking. People began searching through abandoned homes, looking for items that had been left behind. They found photos of loved ones, teddy bears, clothes, shoes, and other items that gave them a glimpse into the lives of those who lived here before the evacuation. Many of these items were taken by looters who saw an opportunity to steal valuable items while the coast was clear. Others were left behind intentionally when the residents fled the city. These items offer a unique opportunity to learn about the lives of the people who lived in Pripyat and the Soviet Union more generally. They provide a glimpse into the daily lives of ordinary people and the material culture of the time period. In addition, they offer a reminder of the human cost of the Chernobyl disaster. The items left behind in Pripyat are more than just relics of the past. They are tangible reminders of the lives that were disrupted by the Chernobyl disaster. What's most fascinating is what they didn't find. They didn't find any food. The stores were bare. They didn't find any cars. All the vehicles were missing. In fact, the only things they found were people. Why didn't anyone take the food or vehicles? Well, it turns out the government ordered everyone to leave immediately, and they weren't allowed to take anything with them. They left everything behind and fled for their lives. That's why all the supermarkets are empty. That's why there aren't any cars on the roads. That's why there isn't a single person in sight. One of the most haunting videos is of the Ferris wheel. It stands still against the gray sky, never having carried a single passenger. Why? Because the amusement park was never opened. The day after the disaster, the park was evacuated and sealed off. Nobody was allowed to enter. Since then, the Ferris wheel has remained frozen in time, a silent witness to a tragedy that could have been avoided. After the evacuation, Pripyat became a ghost town. The streets were empty, the buildings were abandoned, and the only sound was the wind blowing through the trees. But it wasn't long before nature began to reclaim the city. Trees grew through the sidewalks, wild animals roamed the streets, and buildings decayed under the weight of decades. Still, inside, many apartments remained as they were on that April day. Plates were still on tables, clothes in closets, toys on the floor. It's like the residents just vanished into thin air. And in some ways, they did. The people who lived in Pripyat were real people with real lives. They had hopes and dreams, families and friends. But the Chernobyl disaster changed everything. It stole their homes, their possessions, and in some cases, their lives. But they're not the only ones who suffered. The disaster also had a devastating impact on the environment. Large areas of land and water were contaminated by radioactive materials, forcing many species of plants and animals to flee the area. This contamination continues to affect the environment today, making it one of the most radioactive places on Earth. But despite all this, life goes on. Birds still fly overhead, fish still swim in the nearby rivers, and deer still graze in the abandoned fields. In some ways, nature has reclaimed the area. The disaster may have caused a lot of destruction, but it also created an opportunity for nature to heal itself. This is a powerful reminder that no matter how bad things get, life always finds a way to go on. If you've made it this far, you're clearly fascinated by the story of Pripyat. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on the abandoned videos? How do you think the people of Pripyat felt when they realized they couldn't take anything with them? How do you think they felt when they saw their homes being looted? And what do you think will happen to Pripyat in the future? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious. Thanks for watching.